It was an uncharacteristically serious Joe Namath warming up last Sunday as the Jets prepared to take on the new name Colts. During their opening day loss to Green Bay, Namath had failed for the first time in 75 games to register any points. For game number 2, Joe wasn't making any predictions, but you can guarantee he hadn't forgotten the 496 yards he amassed in last year's Colts contest. From the start, it looked like the Jets were on the move as Namath fueled them on passes like this to number 83, Jerome Barkham, to the Colt 5-yard line. But when Stan White's blitz went unchecked, for the third time in 5 years, the winds of ill fortune blew over the Jets signal caller. This time it was a separated shoulder, and it looks like Joe Willie might be cheated of yet another season. It figures to be an equally damaging blow to the Jets, who without number 12 aren't even remotely the same team. Joe's replacement will be number 18, Al Woodall, a 5-year veteran who spent most of last season on the offensive telephones, and on his first series, unfortunately, he looked it. Ubiquitous linebacker number 53, Stan White, was the main man again, and the Colts were on the go. Baltimore superstar to be, Bert the Rifle Jones, opened up once again with some impressive salvos. This one good for 51 yards to wide receiver Glenn Doughty. Jones blasted another volley to Doughty, and the Colts had themselves a 10-3 lead over the disorganized Jets by halftime. Given the ball at midfield by the surprisingly opportunistic Jet defense, Al Woodall started to fill Joe Willie's shoes. His confidence got a big boost when he hit a smiling number 7, Eddie Bell, to tie it up at 10-all. Meanwhile, Bert Jones was experiencing severe growing pains at the hands of the Jets secondary. Dallas Howell's interception was number 4 of the day on young Bert, and he had to be figuring there must be a less humiliating way to become a top quarterback. Al Woodall's flare-out pass to Emerson Boozer put the Colts in the hole 20-10. On the next series, the Colts brought in more seasoned quarterback Marty Domrese, and he quickly demonstrated that whatever Bert Jones had was contagious. Number 51, Ralph Baker, in his 10th year as the Jets' left linebacker, returned this theft 23 yards for his first 6-pointer. On the next series, Domrese turned to the other side of the Jets' 5-man nickel secondary, only to be stung again. Number 46, Rich Soles, had 3 pickoffs for the day as the New Yorkers hauled down a team record of 8. But despite their defensive heroics, the loss of Namath will haunt the Jets long after the sweetness of a 34-10 victory is forgotten. Dwarfed by the dizzying proportions of the Buffalo Bills' new ball yard, the fans came to Rich Stadium for the very first time in the regular season to see their toughened-up Bills tangle with Al Woodall and the New York Jets. With a spectacular new showcase for his enormous talent, O.J. Simpson ripped around right end on Buffalo's first possession, setting up a 42-yard field goal by John Laypole. But that was the only score for more than 3 quarters, as both teams showed an inability to get into the end zone. The Bills, led by number 73, Earl Edwards, featured a rebuilt defense, which harassed Al Woodall and held the Jets at bay. Meanwhile, Buffalo is chewing up more than 200 yards rushing, churning up and down the field, led by O.J. Simpson, flashing the great Jimmy Brown's number 32, and looking for all the pro football world on this afternoon like the immortal Brown's equal. On this, the third NFL Sunday of '73, Simpson exceeded the 100-yard mark for the third time, gaining 123 yards and 24 carries, controlling the ball for Buffalo, protecting their slim lead. The Bills' offensive line is improved, and they may make good their promise of 1,700 yards for O.J. Simpson this season. But when the Bills deviated from their straight-ahead tactics, the Jets closed in, and Buffalo could do no better than 3 field goals, building a 9-0 advantage. But 9 points was good enough as the defense shut out New York until late in the last quarter when Al Woodall, subbing for the injured Joe Namath, hit Jerome Barkham on a play that many Jet fans would have rather done without, as Woodall had to be helped from the field after a 9-7 defeat by the Buffalo Bills.
On the first series of the third quarter, quarterback Al Woodall limped off with an injured knee. With Joe Namath already lost with a separated shoulder, the only man left was rookie Bill Demery, number 6, who with teeth bared threw right into the incisors of the Dolphins' zone defense. Now, with both Namath and Woodall gone, there seems no rumble left in the East to cope with the Dolphin Thunder. The Thunder inside is Larry Zonka's booming runs. The Lightning outside is Mercury Morris on a sweep. For long distance, Miami relies on the thunderbolts of Bob Greasy to Paul Warfield and Marlon Briscoe, number 86. The Miami offense is a hurricane. It's Zonka, Morris, Briscoe, bing, bang, boom, touchdown. Only once did Bob Greasy betray his team, and that came on a picture-perfect interception by Jets cornerback Earlie Thomas. When something fancy didn't work, Greasy went back to basics. And for the Jets, it was tough to tackle a tornado. Greasy capped the Dolphins' 31-3 victory with his second touchdown pass to nifty Paul Warfield. When the game ended, Don Shula's Dolphins had won their third game in 4 tries. And with Joe Namath gone, there seems to be no one who can weather the Miami storm in the AFC East. The New York Jets arrived in Foxborough, Massachusetts with their offense severely hobbled by injury. Of course, Joe Namath was out and Al Woodall was out, so the Jets had to rely on their defense. The defense answered the call and shackled the Patriots' scoring efforts throughout the afternoon. Only John Tarver, number 36, was able to make a dent in the New York forward wall, but it didn't lead to anything of consequence. The Patriots did manage one touchdown on this wild and woolly play which defies description. Suffice to say that number 55, Will Foster, recovered the ball and New England led 7-6. But then Jet running back John Riggins, number 44, took over. A rejuvenated Riggins went for 132 yards on 28 carries and looks like the spark the Jets offense needs badly. New York quarterback Bill Demery completed only one pass all day, but the throw to David Knight got the Jets in close enough for Bobby Howfield's third field goal of the afternoon. Final score, New York 9, New England 7.
The signs in Pittsburgh seemed to be a little premature last Sunday as the New York Jets defense came with larceny in their hearts. Terry Bradshaw rifled one pass direct to number 22, Burgess Owens. The first-year man brought it into scoring range. From the 28, Jets quarterback Bill Demery hit Richard Castor, whose touchdown coupled with an early New York score made it 14-6 Jets. Upset time. But then Steeler pride came alive, and even Joe Namath must have been glad he was on the sidelines. The Steelers' defense pressured Demery out of the pocket and tracked him relentlessly. Then Steeler offensive pride came to the fore as a healthy Franco Harris took off for 102 yards, and it was 1972 all over again. Then it was another man from the past, number 5, Terry Hanratty, whose pass to Ron Shanklin seemingly salted the win away. However, the Jets weren't about to lay down as number 26, Margene Atkins, came up with an extra effort return. But in the end, Bill Demery was done in by Steeler pride in the form of number 23, Mike Wagner. His interception and return set up a 2-yard Franco Harris score, which made the final score 26-14 in favor of the Steel Gang and their iron pride.
Supercharged with confidence and spirit, the Broncos destroy the New York Jets 40-28. The following week, the Broncos again demonstrate the poise to stand up under pressure as Jim...
With the Dolphins in town, future Jets prospects had little to cheer about. Quicksilver Mercury Morris opened the scoring on a 19-yarder the first time Miami had the ball. But quarterback Al Woodall led New York right back on a pass to number 83, Jerome Barkham. The pass led to a John Riggins score. With the game tied at 7, Riggins continued to pose a double threat as receiver and runner. His 3-yard score up the middle put the Jets ahead 14-7. But then the much-praised Dolphin defense began to crack down. And while the defense got rough, so did the offense as Mercury ran into some unexpected interference. Both parties emerged unhurt, and the Miami Lightning bolt went on to further collisions, this time in the Jets' end zone at the end of a 4-yard score punctuated by an all-star spike. Then Bob Greasy lofted a wind-hampered floater that Paul Warfield had to come back on. The tricky maneuver crossed up the defender, and Warfield pranced in for the score. Down 24-14, Woodall tried to come back. He hit little Eddie Bell, who figured the effort was worth a little bell ringing of his own. But in the end, the Dolphins' defense blanketed Woodall's receivers and pressured him out of the pocket, where he became fair game in a losing game as the Dolphins chalked up the win, number 7, 24-14. The Patriots tread lightly when they enter Shea Stadium, and rightly so. They haven't won a game there since 1965. Jim Plunkett did manage to shake loose long enough to hit number 86, Bob Windsor, for an early score. But with only one other point producer late in the fourth quarter, the stigma of the stadium was proving too much for the Pats to handle. It was a frustrating day in general for Jimmy Plunkett, especially with his receivers trying the new hear the ball in technique. With his primary receivers covered and his secondary receivers likewise, Plunkett was continually forced to bite the dust. 6 times Plunkett was sacked, and by the end of the afternoon, he would have only one consolation: it couldn't get any worse. For the Jets, however, it was a different story. Allowing New England a grudging 41 yards rushing, they played an alert, gang-tackling defense that made its own breaks. Chris Farasopoulos' goalward romp was interrupted, but the Jets were quickly back in stride on the power blasts of John Riggins, who scored once and rushed for 96 yards. Emerson Boozer added 6 to the tally himself, plus a healthy 79 yards on the ground. Meanwhile, the walls of Jim Plunkett's protective pocket were as porous as ever, and panic had obviously set in. On this one of 3 Plunkett miscues, number 21, Steve Cannon, was the interceptor, and he returned it 30 yards. Rookie Bill Demery executed well at quarterback for the Jets and showed a good touch on this late score to Jerome Barkham. At the gun, the Jets had themselves a 33-13 victory, a 3-6 record, and hopes of taking the wraps off their offense against the Bengals this Sunday.
The Bengals sprang to a big lead last Sunday, thanks in part to the cat-like cruising of number 19 Essex Johnson. And when Essex wasn't on the prowl, his 240-pound running mate Booby Clark was busy gouging out 72 yards in the game's first score. Obviously, Cincinnati quarterback Ken Anderson had his eyes on a 17-0 advantage. And despite a warning by Jet cornerback number 20 Dallas Howell that wide receiver Isaac Curtis was leaving his zone, Anderson was not to be denied. The result was a seam-splitting 6-pointer for the San Diego State product Isaac Curtis, who in his first year is one of the AFC's top 5 receivers. But on the next series, Al Woodall, hitting 6 for 7, piloted the Jets 77 yards for the 6-pointer to Jerome Barkham. At the start of the second half, Woodall was blazing away again. This time it was a volley to tight end Rich Castor, 37 yards downrange. Two plays later, the Bengals had themselves a contest as Woodall dropped back and locked in on Castor again, who with some fast shuffling was awarded the score. But as the game wore on, despite his 20 completions for 212 yards, Woodall began to wilt under the mauling Bengal rush, and the stage was set for the triumphant return of Joe Namath, absent since his injury last September 23rd. With a little under 2 minutes remaining in the score Jets 14, Bengals 20, Joe started to do his thing. Eddie Bell was the receiver, and suddenly the Jets and Joe Willie were making believers once again. But as close as it was, last Sunday fell well short of the second coming, as first Rich Castor was ruled out on a judgment call. The squabble was just beginning, however, as 2 plays later it was a Castor controversy once again. A repeat shows just how close a call can get. Was Castor over the goal when he made the reception or not? So much for controversy. When in doubt, there's always one place you can look for sure.
Flushing Meadows, home of the Mets, Jets, and last week the Wets. Yes, Flushing Meadows was the scene as the Atlanta Falcons tiptoed into Shea Stadium in lovely, clean white uniforms. The Falcons are hot. So hot that Hall of Fame player Norm Van Brocklin now seems to tower over the coaching fraternity as well. Joe Namath was starting his first game in recent memory, but the natural mud surface was to be the great equalizer. And both teams wound up with almost exactly the same statistics, including almost exactly the same number of good natural mud baths. Claude Humphrey, number 87, helped Joe Namath inspect the condition of the field a little more closely. Not to be outdone, the Jets helped Bob Lee get a better look at the interesting cumulonimbus formations. Bob Lee and rookie Tom Jardine then gave the Jets a lesson in beating the blitz. Jardine's score gave the Falcons the early lead, but Joe Namath brought the Jets right back, and for a while, there were glimpses of the good old days at Shea Stadium. Namath capped an old-fashioned 13-play drive with a third-down pass to Rich Castor for the tying touchdown. In the second quarter, the Falcons scored once again after a New York fumble at the 1-yard line, and then again when Bob Lee found his other rookie wide receiver, Lewis Neal, somewhat open over the middle. Sometimes the zone doesn't work out as diagrammed, and early in the third quarter, Joe Namath had his shot at an easy touchdown against Atlanta's pass defense. Eddie Bell's romp brought the Jets within 1 point at 21-20, but thereafter the league's leading pass defense shut down Joe Willie Mudshoes. Strong safety Ray Brown had 2 of Atlanta's 3 interceptions as the Falcons rolled to their 7th straight victory. With 3 games to go, the Falcons already have assured their highest scoring season, and with 8 wins, the best record in their history. As for Joe Namath, he still hasn't defeated a team with a winning record since, well, you remember Super Bowl III, don't you? One of the many victims of that vengeance was Colt quarterback Marty Domrys, who fell 4 times to the reckless avalanche of green. But it wasn't just the front 4 that got their licks in, as seen when safety Burgess Owens struck Raymond Chester hard enough to cough up the ball. Number 27, Phil Wise, scooped up the fumble and hightailed it 80 yards for the score. But if anyone had a vendetta going last Sunday, Joe Willie was the man, and with 15 of his 21 passes right on, he wasn't to be denied. Just before the half, the defense poured through again, and this time number 84, defensive end Mark Lomas, caused a Colt turnover. And with the Jets set to take off from his own 40, Coach Howard Snellenberger was rapidly approaching the boiling point. After checking off all 5 receivers, Joe picked Jerome Barkham on the Colt 27. 2 plays later, Namath fired a shot to Emerson Boozer, who always is a hungry man near the goal. With the score Jets 17, Colts nothing, halftime at Shea Stadium was a joyous boogaloo. But late in the third quarter, the Colts, on the heels of number 35, Glenn Doughty, started to reverse that score. 5 plays later, George Hunt's field goal started the Colt comeback. Following a Joe Namath engineered field goal, Domrace countered with a big gainer to Tom Mitchell. But the big hitter was this flea flicker from Domrace to former Texas star Cotton Spire, who quickly connected with wide-open receiver Glenn Doughty for the score. With the Colts closing at 20-10, Joe Namath, with all the time in the world, momentarily lost his head. Linebacker Ted Hendricks pulled it in, and 5 plays later, the score was narrowed to 20-17. On the next series, the Jets stalled out, and the Colts took over with a lob to Spire, who broke 3 tackles to get into sure field goal range. But an inexcusable holding penalty pushed the kids from Baltimore back to the 40. And with 1:52 remaining, George Hunt's reaction says it all. The 20-17 decision dropped the Colts to a dismal 2-10 record, which was just fine by the sweetly vindicated Jets. With Joe Namath suffering from a midweek injury, the Jets' game plan was geared to the run. Number 1, Mike Adamle rushed for 84 yards, and teammate Emerson Boozer rushed for 160, as the Jets' blueprint for victory worked to perfection. Boozer scored 2 first-period touchdowns. The first resulted from a well-conceived Woodall pass. The second was highlighted by textbook blocking by the Jets' offensive line. 3 Philadelphia fumbles tarnished first-quarter Eagle drives. The most ruinous was by Harold Carmichael, the NFL's leading receiver. Bolstered by Eagle mistakes and a running game that amassed almost 280 yards, the Jets built a 17-0 lead. But Woodall's gluttony for points got him in trouble when he was intercepted by Randy Logan. With less than 2 minutes to play in the half, Roman Gabriel generaled Philadelphia to the Jets' 2. With it first and goal, Gabriel crossed up New York and connected with Don Zimmerman for the Eagles' first touchdown. Trailing 17-7, Gabriel opened up the second half with an arrow to Carmichael. "62 yards and a thunderous spike later, Philadelphia was back in the game. Last year, Carmichael rusted on the bench, while teammate Harold Jackson led the league in receiving. When Jackson, along with 2 number 1 draft choices, were dealt to the Rams for Gabriel, the elongated game breaker emerged from the shadows. The Eagles' comeback was spurred by cast-off cornerback John Outlaw, who returned a Woodall pass for a touchdown as Philadelphia hung on to notch victory number 5, 24-23. But last week, the headlines in the AFC East belonged to another man and another team, Tom.
As they say, Pat, Miami has the oranges and Buffalo has the juice. Last week, New York's Shea Stadium had not only a large order of chilled orange juice, but a slice of history as well.
Last Sunday was Weeb Eubank's final game as an NFL head coach, and his New York Jets were prepared to give the old mentor a proper send-off with Joe Namath, the master of ceremonies. Number 83, Jerome Barkham, had the Jets on the scoreboard early with a 48-yard touchdown, but the next New York score didn't come about until the closing seconds of the game when Namath found Rich Castor in the same corner of the field. Castor's score didn't mean much because those upstate upstarts, the Buffalo Bills, had long since taken control of the game. One spectacular score was turned in by rookie safety man Bill Cahill, number 22. Number 22 had his moment, but the man of the hour, the week, and the year was number 32, the man they call the Juice. On this 30-yard gain early in the game, O.J. Simpson became one of the very few players ever to rush for 5,000 yards in his first 5 pro seasons. On this 6-yard gain midway in the first quarter, Simpson broke Jim Brown's 10-year-old season rushing record of 1,863 yards. Then, midway in the fourth period on this 7-yard gain, O.J. Simpson broke the barrier many thought would never be attained, 2,000 yards rushing in a single season. O.J. put on quite a show last week and all season long. And as we said in our feature at the beginning of the show, who else could be our featured performer, not only of the week, but of the year? As Jets defensive back Phil Wise stated after last Sunday's game, he just used me up. You know how a streetcar conductor punches your ticket? Well, he just punched my ticket and waved to me from the end zone. He lets you stay with him for a while, then he cuts and he's gone. He's like a flim-flam man. All my life, I thought Jim Brown was the greatest runner ever, but O.J. broke his record. I don't see how anyone could be better, not even Jim Brown.